Hello, my name is Zeigler. I go as Ron. I'm the director of the Nyumburu Cultural Center. And I'm here today to talk to you and share with you actually some information about an art form that, in my opinion, it heals the soul, it uplifts the spirit, and it sensitizes our mission as diversity workers. And the music I'm talking about is jazz. Jazz is a music that's often misunderstood by people who don't have the desire sometimes to delve into the complexity of the music. But it's a very cultural music that has a very profound impact on individuals. And there are many great people who played this music. And I'm sitting here before you in front of one of the great elders who just passed away a few weeks ago, Ellis Marcellus. And I'm by no means trying to compare myself to Mr. Marcellus or anyone in the Marcellus family, because we're talking about a great tradition. But as a musician and someone who loves the music, I'm here today to share with you some similarities as I see it between jazz and diversity, because I think there are a lot of parallels between the two areas. And what I like to do is to play a blues for you. A lot of people don't know that the blues is jazz. You know, jazz started, you know, as an art form that was grounded in the blues. You know, that's an art form that you hear in all kinds of music, popular music. You hear it in reggae. You hear it in rhythm and blues. You hear it in hip hop. I mean, it's a form that's just, you know, it's everywhere. You know, there's a plethora of songs that has that blues infusion within it. And jazz, again, is a music, as I said, is misunderstood. It's come from many, many places. It's come from the churches. It's come from the fields. It's come from the brothels of New Orleans. It's come from the cotton fields of slavery. It has many, many mothers and fathers. And New Orleans is known as the birthplace of jazz, but that's only part of it. You know, the Marcellus is there from New Orleans, but that's only part of the history. So I'm here, you know, I only have 20 minutes. So I don't want to talk too much, but I wanted to just give you some perspective and try to play, I guess, a blues song that can maybe give you the perspective of jazz as a music that's, you know, heavily, heavily steeped in the blues tradition. And the name of this song is called Now Is the Time by Charlie Parker. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Again, that was one of those songs that goes back to the blues tradition. It's called Now's the Time. I don't know, when I was growing up, there was a song we just sing like, do the huckabuck, do the huckabuck, do the bucka bucka bucka, do the huckabuck. So some people say that's where Charlie Parker got that song from. And it could very well be. You know, Charlie Parker was one of the great musicians of all time, as far as jazz music is concerned. So let me share with you, because my time is limited. I want to make sure I get this information to you. Just some brief history about jazz and the tradition of this music. So again, what I'm sharing with you is a title I've called Jazz, a Misunderstood Art Form that heals the soul, uplifts the spirit, and sensitizes our inner mission. So that might seem to some of you like a very lofty, idealistic kind of phrase, but to me, that's what jazz does. You know, I think back growing up, I was more of an athlete, but I played music, and I always loved music, and I always loved jazz music because it's not an easy music to play. As a matter of fact, it's quite complicated. And people think that you can just get up there and play anything. You know, I mean, like, it takes time. You know, they think that, you know, classical music is the standard upon which musicians are measured. And I've never really brought into that European idealistic paradigm because I know the complexity. I took classical saxophone lessons for 5 years, and I know there's a big difference between playing notes and also playing by ear as far as music is concerned. So it's my title. If we say, what is jazz? Okay, what is jazz? So this PowerPoint, I'm going to provide it to you online so you can, you know, go and reference it because I can't go through everything that's here on the screen that you have in front of you. But, you know, jazz is a music that requires improvisation. You know, it takes time, it takes skill. And just to very quickly go through, you know, read this very quickly, the kind of music which improvisation, creativity is required. Within diversity work, creativity is required. There's not always a one way to approach a problem. It takes skill, it takes imagination, it takes thinking outside the box to communicate with people. I don't think anyone can be an expert in every single area of diversity, be it race or religion or nationality or age, but we have specialties within diversity realm. So most jazz performers, players play solos which make up on the spot, which requires considerable skill. There's a tremendous variety in jazz, but most music is very rhythmic, has a forward momentum called swing, uses blues notes, bent notes, syncopation, which is kind of like off the beat, like the phrase I play. Oops, excuse me. a syncopated phrase, that you can put to a melody. It has call and response. The trumpets talk to the saxophones. If I had more time, we could get into all of that. It has patterns and so on and so forth. So we talk about Ella Fitzgerald and Roy Eldridge, who was a great trumpet player. Jazz has, the nature of jazz is that I feel that essentially jazz, to me, as other types of music, you can express many different emotions from pain to joy. You can talk about inequalities within society. It's taking something familiar and making it into something that's really very profound for you. Now, here's some of the similarities I'm talking about when it comes to jazz. I think it teaches teamwork and cooperation, as does true diversity teaches social justice. When we talk about rectifying inequalities, I think jazz, even though it's come from a very much diverse tradition, it teaches cooperation, it teaches teamwork, it teaches, I've played in different bands within the church environment, also the Borough Jazz Club, gone to many, many jam sessions around campus, around the DC, Maryland area. I don't by no means consider myself to be a professional musician, but I consider myself to be a very good amateur. And, if I had time, maybe I could be a professional musician, but, that's another story for another day. Teaches inclusion, understanding about race, gender, some of the greats of jazz music, the ethnicity, religion, the sexuality, they had those demons with them. I'm not saying that jazz is a perfect idiom. It's a culture idiom, as society, and, it has, embraces differences. And just like I mentioned here, the history of our jazz, like the history of our country, is rooted within inequality. And within diversity work, we also have inequalities. We have inequalities towards Black cultural centers, towards immigrant families, towards the LGBT community, marginalized communities, etc. So that's one thing that I really see as a similarity between. Now, I'm not going to go through all the details. This is kind of like some of the information we have here about its origin, about its African origin and traditions, like jazz is music and music is life. In ancient African traditions, the kings, you could hear their music far, far away, and the power of the drum was really important. So this is kind of like a schematic of how jazz evolved. And then we had the mixture of creoles of color, French, Spanish, African-American, white Creoles, African-American Creoles, who went to New Orleans and they performed in Congo Square, and they danced. It wasn't just the jazz, on Sundays they danced. And there's a man by the name of James Collins in his book, The Creoles of Color, he talks about that. Again, New Orleans was not the only city in which jazz developed. There are many other cities in which jazz developed, and these are just a few of the cities that we have. It impacts the different social cultural classes, as far as there was the Victorian culture, and there was also the Renaissance culture, but within the jazz tradition, you had a mixture of affluent and also low socioeconomic. Oftentimes we had Creoles and we had poor African Americans, we had slaves. At the conclusion of the Civil War, we had instruments that was also sold. We had restrictions again, like the Louisiana Black Codes. Here we have a Creole brother by the name of Ferdinand Joseph Lamothe, who's also known as more important as Jelly Roll Morton, who said, he came from France. So these people came from France, but they came from Haiti, all right? And he was very instrumental in the early development of jazz music. Sidney Bechet, a very famous clarinetist and also soprano saxophone player, the instrument I'm playing. Bessie Smith, who played the blues. Again, that blues and fusion music. Ma Rainey, another jazz icon. Scott Joplin, okay, more involved with pre-jazz, you know, in terms of early jazz, but not really jazz per se. Scott Joplin, leading composer, again, of ragtime music, is a picture of him. Again, these instruments were disseminated or distributed at the end of the Civil War. These instruments were given to freed African Americans and also former enslaved African Americans who learned these instruments. And they were mostly European instruments, and they used them for advantage. The original Dixieland Jazz Band. Dixieland is a interesting kind of music. You should check it out. You know, sounds a little corny. You know, we don't have a lot of the jazz, blues, and fusion in it. Again, jazz was part of early life. It was part of the picnics, the funerals, the weddings, all of those things, you know. And again, it touches on sorrow, emotions, and it was part of life. These are some of the early string bands within the jazz tradition. Another picture, Jelly Roll Morton. And this is a picture here that we have of the original Dixieland Jazz Band. I'm gonna show you, if I play one more, because my time is running out here. Some of the early people who played jazz. This is a jazz legend, Charlie Parker. And here's another jazz legend, Louis Armstrong, was from New Orleans. And here's a picture of one of the early jazz greats, Billie Holiday. And we have Bessie Smith. You can look all these people up. And again, I'm gonna leave this for you to see online. Ma Rainey, a very famous jazz musician and vocalist. Jelly Roll Morton, Sidney Bechet again, okay? Here we have W.C. Handy. Okay, the blues. Blues everywhere. The blues everywhere. Again, jazz can be seen in all of those different kinds of traditions. I have one more very quickly. I'm going to show you Share, which talks about some of the, what I consider diversity heroes. Ellis Marsalis is an early diversity jazz hero. The brother who I knew growing up, who just passed away a couple weeks ago, Nigel Allen Gums. So these musicians had a vision, a mission, you know, to make this music a part of the United States, the world actually. And these are some publications that I hope, you know, that you can take a look at. We don't have time to go through that, as far as the Jazz Network, as far as the Journalists Association, and some of them are jazz heroes. So jazz, again, it's a popular music, but it's also a music that we have in the churches, for example. The famous song called Precious Lord, Take My Hand by Charles Dorsey. And you know, that illustrates some of the power of jazz within the sacred tradition. hope you enjoyed this presentation. Support a jazz artist because they're on the front line trying to share culture, trying to share vision, trying to connect with people. We're facing many adversities as a society, as a country. There are many artists who aren't working right now. They still have that vision. They have that mission. Don't look at jazz as a misunderstood art form, but an art form that heals the soul, uplifts the spirit, and sensitizes our mission. See you next time.